Hey, welcome everybody to Top of the Stack. I'm your host and author, Chester Elton, author of Anxiety at Work, Leading with Gratitude, and the Carrot Principle. It's so funny. If you're like me, you want to read more and you've got a stack of books and they're right next to your bed or they're right next to your desk, and you go, I got to get to that book. Well, I've got a couple of recommendations. We just do this once a month. We find great books that we find are really effective for me. I always say us because my co-author Adrian Gostick and I, we do everything together. But the point is if you've got that stack of books and you're looking for one to take to the top of the stack, I have a recommendation for you. And today, this month's book, today we're going to talk about Think Faster, Talk Smarter by Matt Abrams. Matt was on our podcast, Anxiety at Work, and he was so engaging and he was so much fun. We learned so much about, the anxiety that you have when you've got to talk or somebody puts you on the spot, or, you're in a meeting with your boss and your boss all of a sudden says, "Hey, Chester, what do you think?" And you go, "Ah." Anyway, he's written this wonderful book, Think Faster, Talk Smarter. And as an added bonus, he has agreed to be with us here today. So our producer is Natalie. Natalie, why don't we bring Matt in to the, there he is. Wave to the crowd, Matt.
Excited to be here with you, Chester.
Yeah, just a little bit about Matt. He's the author of Think Faster, Talk Smarter, How to Speak Successfully When You're Put on the Spot. He's a lecturer in the organizational behavior at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business, where he teaches popular classes in strategic communication and effective virtual presenting. So I'm just really delighted to have you. We had so much fun on the podcast. I couldn't pass up another chance to spend a few minutes with you. So thanks for finding the time.
Absolutely, Chester. I totally enjoyed our conversation. It was a lot of fun.
So you talk about in your book your various strategies, and it's at the top of like almost every page here, where you say, look, there are certain things that you can do to help yourself not have that anxiety, not be on the spot. You mentioned we've all had that experience where after the conversation, we think, I should have said this.
Right.
So give us a few tips and tell us a little bit about why you wrote the book.
Yeah, so I'll start with why I wrote the book. So there are two different experiences that led me to this. One is my own personal experience. With the last name of Abrahams, I have always gone first. So in a class, a teacher would always call on me first. So most of my education was spontaneous in terms of responding. And I knew how hard that could be. And then at the same time, in my work at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, the deans came to me about 9 years ago and said, "Hey, we have a problem. Our very bright students are unable to respond well when cold called." And Chester, you remember when the professor would say, "Hey, what do you think?" And you had to respond. They knew the answer, but they just weren't able to articulate it. So those two streams led me to really do a deep dive into the work that we're talking about today. And it was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot. And you're right, anxiety looms large in all communication, but especially communication when we're put on the spot, asked a question we need to answer, asked to give feedback, making small talk. And there are things we can do to manage that anxiety. We can focus on relieving the symptoms that we experience, the shaky hands, the sweaty brow, but we can also work on some of the sources. So the very first step in a 6-step methodology that I document is that it's managing anxiety.
Yeah, and you talk about breathing. It's so interesting. Meditation has become such a big part of a lot of people's daily routines. And so I talk about it as being sort of the power of the pause, take a deep breath. You talk about it's not the inhale, it's the exhale. You had a great expression. It's not the rule of thumb, it's the rule of lung.
Excellent. You are such a good reader, and you remember from our discussion. I wish my students remembered as much of what I said. Yes. So one of the best things you can do that works for most people, not every anxiety management technique works for every person, but deep breathing can really help. And you're right. The exhale is where the magic happens. So the rule of lung is you want your exhale to be twice as long as your inhale. And the really cool thing about this is you only have to take 2 or 3 of these deep breaths to take the benefit. So it's not like we have to do a full 20 minutes of deep breathing. So before I walk into the room or before I log into the Zoom, I simply have to take 2 or 3 deep breaths, making sure my exhalation is longer than my inhale. And when I say deep breath, I mean you're filling your lower abdomen. It's like if you've ever done yoga or Tai Chi. It's a real deep belly breath. And that'll set you on a good course for confidence and it actually helps your voice. Your voice will be more resonant.
It's so interesting you mentioned that because we were introduced to these breathing techniques through people that came on our podcast.
Yeah.
And now, before I present, every time I will go just off to the side and
Mhm.
3, 4 really deep breaths, and it is amazing how it just calms your mind. Now, you talk about in your book that being anxious and so on is part of our nature
Yeah.
because we are built to look for danger. Talk a little bit about, because that's a part of us, we have to manage it because everybody has that, right?
Absolutely. So the anxiety that we feel around speaking is normal and natural. Most people experience upwards of 85% of people report feeling nervous in high stakes situations. And those of us who study this believe it's innate to being human. We are wired to be very sensitive to our relative status in a group of people. And when I say status, I don't mean who drives the fancy car, who has the most social media following. When our species was evolving, it was very important to fit in with the group, because if you didn't, you lost access to resources.
Right.
So how did we do that? Well, we did it by being very sensitive and trying to avoid risky situations, socially risky situations. And speaking in front of others is fraught with risk. So it is ingrained in us. We see it in almost every culture that we've studied. We see anxiety around speaking develop around the same time in children's development. It happens in that pre-teen phase. And if you think about it, that's when people really started contributing to the social fabric of the groups they hung out in. So it's part of who we are, but that doesn't mean we can't work to manage it. We can. There are lots of things we can do. In fact, the first book I wrote was called Speaking Up Without Freaking Out. And it had 50 academically validated techniques that we can do to manage our anxiety.
And it's not just speaking, is it? We'll often be in social situations, whether it's a classroom situation or it's a business. You go to the gathering and you want to seem really smart. You don't want to ask stupid questions. One of your techniques, which I think is really, really helpful, is these back pocket questions.
Yes.
Talk
Yes.
about that.
Yes. So one of the challenges that many people face is they get in situations that are awkward for them. And a back pocket question can help. And let me share with you 3 scenarios, spontaneous speaking situations where it would help. And a back pocket question is nothing more than a question you have thought about in advance that you can pull out of your back pocket, at least metaphorically, and use. Let's start with a Q&A session. Let's imagine you're having a Q&A session. You finished a presentation and you say, "Are there any questions?" And you hear crickets. No questions
So
come.
funny.
It's very awkward. Do you just end? Well, that feels kind of hollow and empty. So instead of standing there feeling awkward, simply ask yourself a question. Say, "A question I'm often asked is," and then ask yourself a question. Similarly, imagine you blank out. You're in the midst of giving a presentation, and for whatever reason, you can't remember what comes next. You can figure it out. You just need a little bit of space to do it. So ask the audience a question. I do this when I teach. Sometimes I'll forget what's next. I teach the same class back to back. I can't remember, did I say it here or didn't I? I just need a second to think. So I'll stop talking and I'll just pause and I'll say, "I'd like for all of you to think right now about how what we've just covered applies to your life." That's my back pocket question. You can come up with your own. And while people are thinking of the answer, it gives you just that little break to collect your thoughts. The final scenario where I think this can be really helpful is small talk. Small talk is all about curiosity and expressing interest. It's not about being interesting, it's about being interested. I learned that from one of my podcast guests, Rachel Greenwald. It's about being interested. So if I'm in the midst of an awkward conversation, I don't have, we don't know each other, I simply ask a question I've thought about prior to coming in. So if I'm at a conference, a corporate conference, I'm listening to the keynote. So when I go to the small talk, cocktail party afterwards, I've thought, okay, I'm going to ask this question of people about the big keynote presentation. So having some pre-thought helps you be better in spontaneous speaking. And that sounds a little counterintuitive, but preparation to be spontaneous really matters. And if you think about it, athletes do this all the time. They do lots of drills in preparation. So when they're playing spontaneously, it can really help them.
Yeah, that preparing to be spontaneous. I want to get into that. I will tell you though, those back pocket questions are so helpful. Often Adrian and I will present at a conference and we'll have a book signing. And
Yeah.
people come up and you're signing books, signing the books. And one of my favorite questions is, "Hey, tell me your biggest takeaway. What really resonated with you?" Or
Yeah.
is there one thing you took away that you're gonna do? What might that be? And
Right.
I'll tell you, not only does it make the book signing in those moments more fun for you, because
Yeah.
rather than next, next,
Yeah.
next,
Yeah. Yeah.
how do you spell that?
Yeah.
Is is that it gets you information and it makes people feel valued
Yeah.
that you've asked their opinion.
Absolutely. Yes. So showing that you are actually listening and want to have a positive experience with someone is so powerful. And my mother-in-law had a black belt in this, and she did it with three simple questions or three simple words. She would simply say, "Tell me more." Saying a phrase like "tell me more" opens up the floodgates of connection. You learn deeper information, you signal that you're interested. So anything you do to really connect and extend the conversation from a place of interest really matters. And as a side note, Chester, I need to learn from you how to actually sign a book and talk at the same time. I can't do that. So there's always this awkward silence. So I've actually used the back pocket question. So I'll ask somebody something, so they're talking while I'm signing because I cannot talk and sign at the same time.
Yeah, no, it is. It's really fun.
Yeah.
It's one of the most fun things I like to do because you're
Yeah.
always interested in what did resonate.
Yeah.
Different
Oh,
things resonate
absolutely.
with different people. This idea too, and I just want to reiterate it because if you have one takeaway, this is one of my really big takeaways from our conversation on the podcast
Yeah.
was be interested versus
Yes.
interesting. Because so
Yeah.
often we want to say, "Oh, I want to say something brilliant." Let
Yeah.
someone else say something brilliant. My father always had these great stories, and
Yeah.
one of my favorites was a couple at a cocktail party. And they get separated and they come back together. And the husband asks his wife, says, "So I noticed you were talking to Bob. What did you think?" And she said, after talking to Bob, I thought to myself, he's the most interesting person in the world.
Ah.
And then he said, and then I saw you talking to Mary. What did you think? He says, after talking to Mary, I felt like I was the most interesting person in the world. And I thought, who would you rather be? The one that built yourself up or the one that builds other people up?
Right.
And what else? Tell me more. Gee, that's interesting. Can you tell me more?
Yeah.
It's such a great back pocket question. I love that you explained it as a black belt talent.
Well, I've studied martial arts for decades, and to me, it's actually a very important part of my life. So I look at when I see people who are really skilled, I see it through that lens, because
Right.
people who are really good at communication have worked at it, and they are able to do things that are very subtle that make a very big difference. And so yes, I look for black belts and try to learn from them as best I can.
Okay, couple things because we're short on time, but you talk about not perfection but connection.
Yes.
I think we often demand of ourselves, I have to have the perfect response. Whereas you say, no, it's more important to make the connection. Flesh that out just a little bit.
Absolutely. So, one of the biggest barriers to effective spontaneous speaking is the fact that we put a lot of pressure on ourselves.
Yeah.
We want to do it right. And I've been doing this long enough to say that there is no right way to communicate. There are better ways and worse ways, but no one right way. And the pressure we put on ourselves to say it right, to memorize everything word for word, gets in the way of us actually communicating effectively. And it boils down to a very simple analogy. Your brain is like a computer. It's not a perfect analogy, but it works. You only have so much bandwidth. If you have on your laptop lots of windows open, each one of those applications is behaving just a little less efficiently because all the other ones are open. If my brain is constantly judging and evaluating everything I'm saying, I have less cognitive bandwidth to focus on connecting with you, getting my message across. So if we strive for mediocrity, just get it done, just say what needs to be said, we actually can harness all of our full bandwidth, which means we're likely to do better. So if you focus on connecting your message to others, being present, getting it across versus judging and evaluating, chances are what you say will actually be better. So I encourage people to just get it done, focus on connection, not perfection, and it will really help.
Great. I have one last question to talk to you about how you accept praise, your take model. But before we
Yes.
do that, we've got a QR code at the bottom. You can scan that and order Matt's book. But where can people find you? You've got a wonderful podcast and on and on. Tell us.
Thank you. So, yes, I host a podcast called Think Fast, Talk Smart. You can find it anywhere you get your podcasts. Best place to connect with me are one, mattabrahams.com or on LinkedIn. I do a lot of work there.
Excellent. So, Adrian and I have been working on, gratitude and,
Yes.
carrot principle and all that good stuff. You have a wonderful little acronym about take, about
Yes.
how to accept praise, because so often
Yeah.
we'll think, oh, I want to be humble. So somebody says, hey, really great job. Oh, no, 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 no. And we slough it off, which is kind of insulting to the person that just gave us this compliment. So
That's right.
walk me
Yeah, yeah.
through.
So and I love so in the back part of the book, the very last appendix, there's a QR code, and if you take a picture of it, it takes you to a hidden website that has additional material. And this take is in that additional material. It's a video of me talking about it. So I love that you actually did your extra homework. I believe in structure. Structure is a step-by-step process for helping you assemble information. It's like a recipe. It doesn't mean you always use it. It doesn't mean you don't change it around, but it gives you a place to start. So take stands for first thanks. When somebody expresses praise, express gratitude, thank them. Acknowledge what it is they're talking about. So if somebody expresses gratitude for work you've done on a project, say thank you for that. I and the team worked very hard to bring this product to fruition. The K is keep it going. Talk about what's coming next. So beyond this project, we hope to do extra iterations, etc. And then finally, you end but with explaining the value and what this really means to you. So take is thank for gratitude, acknowledge what is being recognized, talk about what's coming next, keep it going, and then explain what this all means for you personally. And in so doing, it just makes it easier because many of us feel awkward in that moment.
Yeah. So I have my book. Here's the little fun QR code at the end that I did scan. And
Yeah.
listen, so many great takeaways. Matt, the work that you're doing, and I love that you're doing it with super smart kids. They hit this roadblock, and not
Yeah.
only do they then not feel super smart, they don't want to do it again, right? We have a bad experience, we don't want to do it again. So it's think faster, talk smarter, how to speak successfully when you're put on the spot. I've got this book in my library, and guess what? You should have it in your library too. And we always say, look, anybody can buy one book. Buy two and give one to a friend.
I love it. Yeah, and Chester, thank you for this opportunity. And I love that you've actually underlined things in dog-eared pages. That's what success is like. The book is designed to help people deal with challenging communication situations. And if you're using the book as almost a handbook, then that's its purpose. I hope it helps people. And thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, no, listen, this has been a delight. Follow him on LinkedIn, listen to his podcast, buy his book. Trust me, it'll make you smarter, it'll make you more confident, and it will lower your anxiety. And we all need a little more than that. Thanks again for
Absolutely.
your time, Matt. This has been wonderful. Top of the stack. My name's Chester Elton. Buy the book, and we'll see you next month. Cheers.